to it and actually pick and choose?
So that requires some research.
Hmm.
You need to have some ideas of your philosophies, okay? Traditional, unit studies, classical, Charlotte Mason, unschooling, free spirit.
Uh-huh.
You need to know which ones, where do you lean? Which way are you leaning? Um,
Hmm.
and then where you have a direction you can head. Even if you just say, I want to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
Uh-huh.
decide which road or roads you want to head down. But
Hmm.
beware that there are pros and cons to each philosophy. So I just want to go
That's
through them
good to
real quick.
know. Yes,
Um, so
please.
for traditional is simple and easy and straightforward. It's just
Hmm.
open the book and go. For high schoolers, it's a good option. Testing and grading is simple to do. It looks good on a transcript,
Hmm.
but it's not going to fit that active child. It doesn't often take into account the learning styles of your particular child. It may
Right.
be too dry.
Hmm.
It may be too test focused. And especially for your
Right.
children with learning struggles or struggling learners and those kinds of kids, traditional sometimes really stumbles them up, especially if the focus is on testing.
Yeah.
And it may be
Mm-hmm.
too hard to do if you have multiple children doing multiple subjects.
Right. It is
Traditional
very
is really
labor
hard if you
intensive.
have five different, kids that you're doing this history and you're doing this history and you're doing this history. It makes it really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your pros and cons of traditional. Unit studies, they encourage creativity. They allow you to go in deep and immerse in subjects. They appeal
Right.
to different learning styles. So those special needs learners really like unit studies.
Especially the
They
ones that
bring,
don't transition well. They like
yep,
stay on that focus for a long time.
yep. They bring families together,
Hmm.
but they sometimes leave holes or gaps in learning.
Yep.
Students don't always
Great.
know how to tie unit studies together. So if you're doing
Hmm.
unit studies in history, they don't know how those pilgrims go with those, with the Revolutionary War. It's just two
Mm-hmm.
separate subjects, and they don't know how to pull that together in a history chronology.
Right.
Unit studies can also be expensive, and they
Mm-hmm.
can require a lot of parent planning. Um,
Yes.
and it's also hard to determine exactly what's been learned in unit studies,
Hmm.
because a lot of them don't come with tests.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so that's unit studies. Classical, it gets children learning and thinking critically. It encourages question asking and wrestling with beliefs and worldview. It takes into consideration the stages of development,
Hmm.
your early, your middle, I mean your grammar stage, your logic stages, your middle schoolers, your rhetoric stage, your high schoolers. It's super strong in reading and history, and it's very language focused,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also be very intense and rigorous and focus on higher minded learning. And it can burn kids out. And I've
Yeah.
seen classical burn children out. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to be careful with it. And I have a classical curriculum. And so, I recognize that it can definitely burn.
Hmm.
Um, Charlotte Mason is built around family and family time. It's rich in
Hmm.
literature and history and active learning. It encourages questioning and curiosity, but it tends to require a lot of parent planning. This is another one that you got to do a
Right.
lot of mom work. Its focuses on the arts over sciences and math, making it harder for college bound students. Um, Using only living books, which is the Charlotte Mason philosophy, means you may not be able to fill in the gaps in their learning. If you're just reading living books without some kind of spines to pull it together, it can leave gaps. And Charlotte
Right.
Mason can also be a rather expensive way to go as you're pulling and piecing it all together.
Right. You end up with a huge library in your house.
Yes, yes.
Or visiting the library every week.
Unschooling meets children where they are. It encourages play and active pursuit in areas of interest. It gives students a love for learning, but it assumes that all children pursue worthy areas of interest, and not necessarily do all kids pursue worthy areas of interest. I had one that did. I had one that if we followed him, and all of his interests, we would, if we had just unschooled him, he would have learned tremendous amount. I had
Hmm.
one that didn't. That wasn't his bent. So we would have just dropped off the cliff in terms of homeschooling. Um, Unschooling can go overboard on child led if the child isn't leading in good directions. It
Hmm.
requires a lot of parental planning to make teachable moments out of what the child is pursuing.